camp session, which is a 10-day plan to get you back on track. So the first thing I have to ask you is, how serious are you about completing your studies and doing the work? Because a 10-day bootcamp plan is a bit like doing this type of workout. You'll notice that the instructor is watching and giving guidance, but you have to be willing to do the work. And what we find is a lot of people aren't willing to do the work. They keep looking for shortcuts or other strategies to get to the end result. You know, how can I get through this really quickly? Or what's a quick tip? And the answer is hard work is the only way. So if you're trying to use a sneaky strategy, it's a bit like this bus trying to get underneath the bridge. It doesn't work. But what tends to happen is people don't learn their lessons semester after semester. We are a bit like the warning sign. So before this bridge, which is a famous bridge in Melbourne that has a lot of trucks and buses hitting it, there are these bollards hanging, and if you hit these, they make a loud noise and they say, you're pretty much going to hit this bridge. And we're a bit like that. We give you resources and emails and practice exams and feedback, but it's up to you to use it. And so this 10-day study plan is a quick guide through all those resources to bring you up to speed. Now, is it guaranteed to be successful? No, it's not. Even with the bollards, people keep hitting the bridge. So even though we're here, even though there's resources, even though there's practice exams, if you don't follow them or you don't spend the hours it takes, you will experience difficulty. So 1/3 of candidates that we surveyed have said they are struggling to juggle work, study, social life and family and fall behind. So this is very normal. So bootcamp is designed to just accelerate you, jumpstart you, get you back into your studies, because it's incredibly difficult. It's very, very hard in such a short amount of time, especially with work and life and maybe kids. All of that together is tricky, but good structure and good discipline is really going to help you. Now, sometimes people tell me they have no time to study, and that could be true. But one of the amazing things is the average Australian over 14 years old spending 6 hours just on social media, not including TV or Netflix. The average 14 to 24-year-old Australian women, 14 hours a week. And so if you turn that off and you open your CPA books, we expect about 15 hours a week of study. You just found that time. And so we have habits and patterns in our lives that you'll be amazed that if you carefully review them, you will be able to switch track and get back on track. So my number one tip for passing the CPA exam, and I talk about this more in the exam prep webinar, which we use to sort of be the tail end of bootcamp, is to practice doing questions, writing out answers. Don't just read it and look at a solution. Actually do it, because if you're going to be in an exam, you need to practice what it's like being in that exam. If you want to play Wimbledon tennis finals, then you actually have to practice playing tennis before the day. And this is the same thing. It's surprising how many people do a lot of reading, but not a lot of application in exam scenarios to build up your capability. Now, these are the top 25 questions that we get asked. What are the exam marks? What is the pass mark? Is the exam 100%? Should I defer? Am I behind? Am I on track? How am I going? Is it open book? I'm not going to answer any of those questions in this webinar. You have to wait till the exam prep webinar, which is the tail end of bootcamp. But I hope I've planted some good seeds in your mind. So the quick topics I'm going to work through. What is our 10-day study plan? Learning versus reading. And we cover this in Study Skills Essentials as well. How to revise, exam technique, and should I sit or should I defer? So quick reflection question for you. Are you at the A level? Well, bootcamp is going to help you move up towards the E and F level. If you're at the C level, bootcamp's going to give you some structure. If you are D, more structure again. And if you're E or an F, then maybe you can watch me at double speed as you go through this. So as I said before, effort's required. Please don't think that this is a quick tip, a magical alternative to hard work. Only hard work gets you the knowledge. And don't forget, you're studying not to pass an exam, but for knowledge to apply in your workplace, to do your work better and have a good career. So this is what I normally hear. Oh, I'd love to study harder, but I'm too busy. I'm too tired because I'm too busy. I work for 12 hours a day. I have 3 hours with my family, and then I'm too tired. I'm too distracted, or it's just too difficult. Well, guess what? If that's a genuine reality, then defer. What's quite bizarre is when someone is too busy, too exhausted, totally strung out. And then I say, why don't you defer? Why don't you just wait till next year? Oh, I can't do that. Okay, well, then you're just going to be incredibly stressed and you're probably going to perform poorly. So either get rid of those obstacles or stop using them as excuses and get back to your studies. Or if you cannot actually overcome them, then defer. It's quite simple, but to choose a poor strategy, to me, it doesn't make sense. So what about the 10-day plan? Well, we've been doing this for over 10 semesters now, and our data shows that if someone dabbles in a few of our videos, a couple of quizzes maybe, they're normally hovering at or below the average pass rate. People who watch some of the videos and maybe do a practice exam, we see their statistical chance of passing lift a bit, but not very strongly. Those who go through all of the content, including the 2 practice exams properly, we see a huge lift towards that distinction or high distinction level. To give you an example, in a lot of our subjects, roughly a quarter of our candidates who work through the resources properly are getting a distinction or high distinction. That's much, much higher than the average CPA rate. So you do the work, you get the reward because you've pushed that knowledge deep into your brain and you've learned how to apply it. So if you've just opened your study guide and you're like, what do I do? Where do I start? Here you go. This 10-day plan, which is underneath the webinar, you just download it, type in your own notes. And do you have to do it in 10 days? No, you can do it in 8, 15, 20. It's just a structured plan. It takes you through the short video tutorials, then a study guide review, then the module quizzes and webinars. And if you work through this process, and it's going to take you up to 3 or 4 hours a day, you will be ready to sit practice exam 1. Then when you do practice exam 1, you will get true feedback about whether you understand the material, whether it's probably better to defer. So it's pretty simple. It turns up as a document. One of the things I like, it says turn off Facebook and other distractions. And then step by step. So where do I start? What do I do? Go to module 1, look at the units, watch the short video, do the mini quiz, do the relevant reading, work your way through. You'll get into our units and we say, watch this, do this, attempt this. So there might be a video to watch, there might be a PDF to download, there might be a short quiz that takes 5 minutes to do to embed your knowledge. And then at the end it says, go and do some reading. So go through the units, tick them off once you've done them. Excellent, make some comments. If you get stuck on one, make a little note that just says, go back and watch that video. Or if you understand it totally, tick it twice and say, no need to revise that. I fully understand it. Then watch the webinars. The webinars consolidate your knowledge. Some people prefer to watch the webinar, then read the book. Some read the book, then watch the webinar. Find out what suits you best, but make sure you watch it because then you have a picture in your mind of the content. And then you're using your ears, audio listening. You're getting your visual as well as your reading. So you're learning from all these different angles, activating your brain more effectively, learning more deeply. So lots of systematic hard work, no magic, just like a physical training boot camp. And as you work through all the units, then you watch the webinar, then you do the reading. Now you're ready to complete the module 1 quiz, and then there's module 2 quiz. There's lots of mini quizzes as well. You'll see some revision quizzes appearing. Great. You start your quiz, you get your results, read the solutions carefully and find out what you got wrong. And if you do this for 10 days, you will be ready to complete practice exam number 1. So you do practice exam 1, we will give you an estimate of your scaled score. What does that mean? Well, we don't know exactly what you'll get on your final exam, but we know that people like you, whatever your number is, tend to get a scaled score of X. So we're going to say people in your bucket normally get this. Is it a guarantee? No, but it's a pretty close estimate. And as you do this bootcamp, make sure you put in some backup plans for, like, what if you get sick? What if you have a car accident? What if work gets crazy busy? What if you have family issues to deal with? Because you are likely in a short semester to have bits of your time disappear. So make sure you're prepared. Now, learning is not reading, and we cover this in much more detail in the Essentials webinar. So if you get time, go and watch that. I'll give you some brief touch points here. It's not easy to study. It's not easy to really read something deeply and carefully and rehearse it and practice it until it's part of your knowledge base. but it's not an excuse to say I'm busy or I'm working or I don't know how. People study in very inefficient ways, so you use a lot of time for very limited output. A good example is if you're sawing a tree or chainsawing or chopping something with an axe, if you haven't sharpened that axe, you're going to waste a lot of time and a lot of energy. So you need to put in very disciplined effort, but it needs to be thoughtful effort. We have no tips and tricks. We have no magic talismans to get you through, but we can point you in the right direction so that your hard work leads to the most effective outcome. Because why do 30 hours of study when you can do 20 of the right kind of study? So what do you need to do every week? Well, especially for financial reporting and especially for advanced tax, you got to be doing 15 hours a week. Now, for some of the other modules, a little bit shorter, maybe a little bit easier to comprehend, maybe 10 to 15 hours a week. But if you try and do financial reporting, and then you try and do, especially module 4 and 5, and you try and do it in 4 or 5 hours, you will have zero comprehension. So you have to put in the hours. You also have to have a target that you're going to aim for. So my question to you right now, what result are you planning towards achieving? Not what result do you want? You don't want, Father Christmas to be bringing it to you. What you want is, what are you going to aim for? And I hope you're aiming for this sort of category, because as a future CPA, I want you to have deep knowledge that makes you actually useful in the workplace. So one of the key units we have right at the start, and it shows you how to, the essentials webinars in here, and then make your results pledge. It says target, it's specific, measurable, needs to be achievable, relevant, and time-based. So it's a good, smart measure. Then book your practice exam if you haven't already, build your study plan, and there's some FAQs and erratas here, little updates and explanations to help you with tricky areas of the study guide. So make your pledge. Now you have a mental commitment, and it's learning time, which is not reading. So when you learn, focus on the module objectives, because this is what the CPA Australia have decided they want you to learn, and that's what they're going to examine you on. There's some guidance on how to summarize. So key instructions for summarizing is in the Essentials webinar. And then how to do an index. Of course, lots of people will just ask for one. Give me your index. Great. It's a bit like paying someone to go and do push-ups for you so you can get nice and fit. Might make you feel good watching them do all that hard work, but actually doesn't really add much value. The whole point of the index is reading the words, thinking about what it means, translating it into your own words, and then compiling it in a structured manner for your revision. Mind maps and flow charts of key themes are useful. Theashin often produces flow charts. I like tables, all different ways of capturing that data in unique and clever ways in your own language to guide you through. And we use videos and PDFs and quizzes so that we tap into all different types of learning styles. One thing you'll notice in our PDF slides, often they have lots of pictures and not many words. And you might think, how is that helpful? And the answer is our brains are designed to do a lot with imagery compared to text. So when we see an image, that can actually unlock a huge amount of knowledge. So we try and match images to useful concepts like what is an industry? And the babushka dolls is a good example of an industry having sub-industries all the way along. So we talk about different pictures telling different stories, and that way, as you read the study guide, you'll remember it more clearly. So we recommend that you watch the short videos, then you read the study guide. We give you practice questions as part of your webinars. So people often say, how do I practice for my exam? And I say, practice writing the answer. So here's one from ethics. We say, here's a scenario, write out what the answers are. If you take the time to practice writing those answers, you will be much more thoroughly prepared by the time you get to your exam. Then you'll watch the webinar. The webinar will reinforce and discuss those concepts. Then you do the module quizzes, and then the mid-semester test, then the practice exam and the practice exam. So you can see this boot camp, this structure, and you can see why we call it guided learning. We guide you in a systematic manner through the resources from the beginning to the end. Some more tips on how to study effectively. Antonia gives some great examples, the 5-10 rule. So the YouTube clip is in the link. Please check it out. It's only a 2-minute video, but I think you'll find it useful. So coming up to the exam time, you've done your boot camp, you've done a practice exam, now you want to revise. We'll talk about this more in the exam prep webinar, but you need at least 10 days of revision. So you can't be studying, you can't be learning the night before your exam. Your brain doesn't work that way. You need to have all that learning done, and then it's about building, reinforcing, bringing it back into your front of mind so you're ready to apply it in your exam. So you should be rereading your highlighted text or your summary notes. You should be reading through those objectives and testing yourself, and then you should be working through all of the quiz questions, all of the study guide questions. And you can see that this is like the final practice. So if you haven't finished your studies with at least 10 days to go, you're going to be under a fair bit more pressure because it's very hard to go over old ground and learn new things when the clock is ticking. The other thing as part of your revision, you should be going through the study guide saying, where are they going to ask me a question? And the key information is in your module weighting. So if a module is worth 25%, you're going to get a quarter of your exam from that module. Where in the module? Well, the question should focus mostly on those module objectives. So you can start narrowing, the whole study guide's examinable, but you can see where the study guide is emphasizing key points. As you read as well, you can ask, is this technical specific content or just general conversation to and fro? If it's just general conversation, you can't really write an exam question on it. I wrote, is this just fluff? Fluff is the wrong word, but it's kind of like explanatory. Whereas if it's very technical and very specific, yes, it can be an MCQ. So focus your attention by thinking, if I was the examiner, where would I write the question? So with exam technique, one of the things we find is people have messy technique. You turn up to the exam, you might have studied really hard for 150 hours and then you have a poor exam. Why? Because doing an exam is a special skill. It's about being able to sit for 3¼ hours, calmly reading and answering questions without getting too tired, without getting stressed or grumpy or upset, and the discipline to manage your time carefully. So if you can't, for example, move on to a question you don't know, that's terrible. In an exam, we call this the sunk cost problem. You spent 10 minutes on a question you don't even know the answer. Okay, so then you spend another 5 minutes on it. That's terrible. The time spent is sunk. Move on to the questions you do know the answer. I'll talk about that more in the exam prep webinar. The other thing with exam technique, lots of people try and stay up all night. They do all these crazy things. They're full of coffee and they're full of V, and they're just beating their body up. Your body and your mind are going into that exam. Your body has to feel good. It has to be hydrated. It has to be full of healthy food and water and ready to go. So good sleep, calm, managing stress and cortisol levels are critical. So we'll talk more in the exam prep webinar about breathing. Breathing slowly, managing how you feel, calmly going through the exam. There's a huge difference between someone who's panicked and agitated and someone who's calm. And I can speak to this a little bit because I did a foundations exam recently just to get used to using the online platform. And of course, I was running late and then I couldn't find my ID to do the proper proctor check-in. So I had a full proctored exam and my heart rate just skyrocketed. And it was very hard to focus for the first 5 or 10 minutes because everything was frantic. So my strong recommendation, breathing, reading, and make sure you're fully ready for your exam. Remember, it says get there half an hour early. Make sure that you're ready half an hour early. Make sure you have your ID. Make sure you've done all the clever, smart things to give you a successful outcome. You don't need that kind of stress. So the best thing for exam prep, one thing I can tell you, another thing is you do it. It's always better to do it. So what should you do? Our practice exam, 3¼ hours. Now, some people are like, oh, that's a long time. Plan the time, do it, because once you get used to sitting still for 3¼ hours, by the time you get to the CPA exam, you'll be totally ready. You only get one attempt, so you can't print it out or check it out or come back to it later. It's not a set of quiz questions. It is a practice exam simulation. So you get to know what it feels like. You get to practice your exam technique. Questions like, should I do my written response first or multiple choice question first? How do I do that? Practice in the practice exam. Check your timings. You can, and we'll talk about that more in terms of what's a scaled score, how do I do my timings, how do I answer an MCQ, an ERQ. Here's your performance ratings might come out. We'll talk all about that. So you got to watch the next session. Finally, do I sit or do I defer? And Antonia is brilliant here. She points out all the things we've observed that candidates do. Over years, it's quite mocking, so I hope you can handle it. But check it out, it's very funny. And one of the things, some people say, oh, I'll probably get special consideration, so I'll be fine. That's a very risky strategy. If you've had a difficult workload or there's been issues, do not think special consideration is an easy way through, and don't say that, oh, I worked really hard this semester, work was really busy. CPA Australia will reject that type of situation. So if you have a genuine medical condition, if you have an exam incident, or you experience personal hardship, yes, consider special consideration. But more often we say, and the most interesting experience, we've had a candidate who said, I've had a heart attack, but I still want to sit my exam, but I haven't been able to study. Okay, so think that through. I honestly think that you should defer in that situation because you don't know the content. So why put yourself through the stress of being examined? So there's an early deferral fee. If you've done no work and you have no time available, take advantage of that. If you think you've done enough, but you do the practice exams and you do terribly poorly, then take advantage of the late deferral. Often people say, oh, I'll give it a go anyway. Well, you can try that, but these exams are rigorous, they're difficult, and just giving it a go just doesn't work. So what should you do? Do some quizzes, do a practice exam, do the 10-day study plan, make it through. If you can make it through all those content and you feel like you know it, do the practice exam, you will get an estimated scaled score, and you will either be clearly in a good category, you'll be borderline, or you'll be in a very negative category. Make your choice, make a smart decision, have a calm approach. And this idea that, oh, if I defer, I feel like a failure, or if I defer, does that mean I've given up? Absolutely not. It's the cleverest strategy based on the information in your hands. So your career is going to last for 40 years, maybe. So if it's going to last for 40 years, whether you sit your exam now or in 6 months' time is pretty much irrelevant. So I hope I've encouraged you. I hope I've given you some tips and tricks. The next step, go download the 10-day study plan, work through it as your revision, get up to speed, do a practice exam, and then make some decisions. Thank you.